Good morning, good friends, dear friends, and welcome to the main object big book study of Alcoholics Anonymous. I am an alcoholic. My name is David. So, hello, good to see you all. And the first thing I'd like to do is ask our friend um, Karen S. to read the AA preamble.
Hi, everybody. I'm Karen, alcoholic. Good to see everybody. The AA Preamble. Alcoholics Anonymous is a fellowship of people who share their experience, strength, and hope with each other, that they may solve their common problem and help others to recover from alcoholism. The only requirement for membership is a desire to stop drinking. There are no dues or fees for AA membership. We are self-supporting through our own contributions. AA is not allied with any sect, denomination, politics, organization, or institution, does not wish to engage in any controversy, neither endorses nor opposes any causes. Our primary purpose is to stay sober and help other alcoholics to achieve sobriety.
Karen, thank you so much. And now I'm going to ask everybody to join with me and in inviting God into this meeting this morning um, by saying the Serenity Prayer. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Uh, so, welcome once more. And we are a line by line. I think everybody has been here before, but I'll just briefly touch on we're a line by line big book study, and we break the text down into 5 categories, and I'll explain that as we go along for those who may not be aware. And one of the things we do is we highlight each category in a particular color. It just makes it kind of turns the big book, elevates it to a new level, into a just really useful tool, text for sharing with others. What we will do today is our usual format. I'll share the reading until, and we go, like I said, we go line by line. And so we're going to cover a little over 2 pages today, which for us is like huge. So I'm going to try to get it all in, and I'll share till about 7, and then we'll open it up for questions, discussion, um, and just FYI, so everyone is aware, um, the meeting is being recorded, and it will be posted on YouTube as an archive, so that allows people who didn't make the meeting or want to review, they can do that. Just 2 points on that. Only the audio is recorded, and only my part. So if somebody is wary of having their comments recorded, they are not. So, also to get us oriented, just last week we touched on, we went to spiritual experience, Appendix 2 in the back. We are back into the main text now. We are at the top of page 26, where it begins, a certain American businessman. And so I just want to summarize a little bit where we're at today. And one of the things we saw last week was with the addition of Appendix 2, the spiritual experience. Bill really made it clear that a spiritual awakening, um, which is most often, for most people, a gradual process, that spiritual awakening is available to any alcoholic. The only requirements are honesty, open mindedness, and willingness. And Bill was really smart about where he put that first of 3 mentions of the spiritual experience, because with that in mind, it's open to anybody. It can be a gradual process, honesty, open mindedness, willingness. So, that in mind, in today's reading, um, Bill now drives these points home by citing the example of an unnamed American businessman. I don't think Mr. Hazard would, at this point, since he's been deceased a long time, I don't think he would mind me identifying him. The person he's talking about is Roland Hazard, and who had a huge influence on the early days of Alcoholics Anonymous, and was a friend of Ebby's, and there are a lot of connections there, and I'll talk about that in a bit. So anyway, Bill drives the points home from the spiritual experience by citing the example of Roland H. and the words of Roland's psychiatrist, the renowned Carl Jung. Jung declares that only through what he calls a vital spiritual experience can those with chronic alcoholism be saved. And so, with that in mind, let's start at the top of page 26. And I'll just, about 2/3 of this paragraph is, I call it explanation. So it's going to be in green. I highlighted it in green. I'll tell you when we switch, because then it gets into warnings. But a certain American businessman had ability, good sense, and high character. I just want to mention something here. This is the first of, I think, 3 examples that Bill offers early in the book of individuals struggling with alcoholism. And there are certain similarities in all the examples that I want to point out, because it took me a while before they sort of became obvious to me. But I think they're important. And the other examples I'm talking about that come to mind are Jim the car salesman, our good friend Jim, Fred the accountant, and there are a few others, but those are the sort of top 3 in the early text. So I think 2 key things we need to see here is that in all 3 cases, these are people who come to these beliefs or come to Alcoholics Anonymous having had tremendous failure in trying to stay sober by other approaches, and in some cases tremendous failure in Alcoholics Anonymous prior to staying sober. So basically what we're talking about are 3 chronic relapsers. In almost all cases, these are people, they may not necessarily be at a high bottom, they may be low bottom, but they have a history of high achievement and high character and high intellect. And I take a moment to point those things out, because what Bill is basically driving home with those 3 examples is that high achievement, high intellect, high character, they're all wonderful attributes. They will not save you from the disease. So moving on. For years, he floundered from one sanitarium to another. Today we would call them rehabs. He had consulted the best-known American psychiatrist. Then he had gone to Europe, placing himself in the care of a celebrated physician, the psychiatrist Dr. Jung, who prescribed for him. This is all again in green, explanation. Though experience made him skeptical, he finished his treatment with unusual confidence, and he was under Dr. Jung's care for a year. Roland was wealthy, by the way, so he could afford to spend a year in Europe under the care of Dr. Jung. His physical and mental condition were unusually good. That's in green also. So first of all, if you check the link, or check the chat, There is a link. I have several links this week that I'm posting there that offer some juicy tidbits, especially for AA history buffs. I'll post it again for people who just came in. There is a Wikipedia page on Roland Hazard, which is really good. It goes into depth about his history and also Dr. Jung, Carl Jung, and Alcoholics Anonymous. The rest of this paragraph I have in warning. So, setting the stage, Roland Hazard goes to Europe for a year, is under the care of Carl Jung, who at that point was the most celebrated psychiatrist in the world, only perhaps second to Sigmund Freud. So he went to the top. So here's Roland's mindset when he is done with Dr. Jung. Above all, he believed he had acquired such a profound knowledge of his inner workings, of the inner workings of his mind and its hidden springs, that relapse was unthinkable. I hope everyone's clear why I would consider that a warning. Because of and the next sentence explains why. Nevertheless, he was drunk in a short time. More baffling still, he could give himself no satisfactory explanation for his fall. Another warning. I was tempted, folks, that last sentence, he could give himself no satisfactory explanation for his fall. I was almost tempted to make that a promise or a reward rather than a warning. Why would I consider that a promise or a reward? Because I believe, anyway, Bill doesn't say it explicitly, but I believe that the reason that Roland was, and we'll see, Roland was able to stay sober after his next visit with Dr. Jung. And I believe the reason that he was able to stay sober was that at this point he was completely baffled and without understanding. He was baffled. I have no answer. I'm empty. Which means he was finally in a position where he could be open to someone else's ideas rather than his own. The next sentence I have in green as explanation. He returned to the doctor, whom he admired, and asked him point blank why he could not recover. Next sentence is a warning in pink. He wished above all things to regain self-control. And I hope everyone understands why I consider that a warning. Because in this context, and we'll see, the self-control, the self-knowledge, it's part of the problem, not the solution. And then the rest of this paragraph I have in the rarely used orange for a question. So this sets up the question. He seemed quite rational and well balanced with respect to other problems, yet he had no control whatever over alcohol. Why was this? And I think our answer is actually in the first part of that question. He seemed quite rational and well balanced with respect to other problems. What we find is that, well, I'll put it this way. When I was new, my sponsor told me, because I had been to college and I knew a lot of things, Um, I'm being facetious, but I had been to college. And so my sponsor told me he had never seen anyone who was too dumb for AA, but he had seen a lot of people die who were too smart. Now, that doesn't mean that smart people can't get sober. But what it does mean is that the problem solving skills that lead to success or our ability to navigate life in all other respects, the problem solving skills and the character traits that allow that to happen will kill us if we apply them to our alcoholism. So, moving onward, first sentence in the next paragraph, the third paragraph in the page is a green explanation, or description rather. He begged the doctor to tell him the whole truth, and he got it. And the rest of the paragraph I have in pink for a warning. In the doctor's judgment, he, meaning Roland H., was utterly hopeless. He could never regain his position in society, and he would have to place himself under lock and key or hire a bodyguard if he expected to live long. That was the great physician's opinion. There are two things I'd like to share with you at this point. If you look in the chat, there is a link to a letter that Carl Jung wrote to Bill W. in 1961. And that letter details, from Dr. Jung's perspective, exactly why he said what he said at that point to Roland and why he held back for so long. So that's the first point. Anyway, the letter is great. And actually, I'll share a little bit more on that later. But there's so much rich information, not just from a historical point of view, but from understanding our disease. I almost wish that that letter was part of another appendix in the big book. Anyway, the other thing that I want to mention is that, remember a few weeks ago when we were probably in Bill's story, and I shared the idea that when you read Bill W. and Dr. Bob's story, you see 4 commitments that they had to experience, both gentlemen had to experience before they were able to stay sober. And just briefly, those 4 commitments were a high resolve, knowledge of the medical facts, a spiritual plan of living, and probably the most important one, ego deflation. And I bring this up now because can we see how, in addition to telling Roland the hard truth, Dr. Jung was also pushing him, intentionally or not, to the point of ego deflation, utter hopelessness. Next paragraph is, I have it as a promise, all in blue. Yep, the whole paragraph. But this man still lives and is a free man. He does not need a bodyguard, nor is he confined. He can go anywhere on this earth where other free men may go without disaster, provided he remains willing to maintain a certain simple attitude. I'm going to say here also, Bill is he aspired to be a good writer, and he was a good writer, because he does this setup where it's hopeless, it's dark, there's just no hope at all. And then he sort of jumps ahead, he fast forwards, friend says, but hold it, he's a happy dude these days, and he has no problem with alcohol. And as a writer, he's hooking us and making us want to know more, rather than just telling us the whole story in sequence. Anyway, the next paragraph at the top is all in green for explanation, description. Some of our alcoholic readers may think they can do without spiritual help. Let us tell you the rest of the conversation our friend had with his doctor. And do you see how important it is that a reader go to the spiritual experience prior to reading this? Because in the spiritual experience, he establishes, hey, you don't have to have a big white light flashing moment like me. You can have this slow, gradual process, but it's open to everybody. Bill says it's open to everybody. And then Carl Jung basically says, not only is it open to everybody, it's essential for everybody. The next paragraph I have all in pink for a warning. The doctor said, you have the mind of a chronic alcoholic. I have never seen one single case recover where that state of mind existed to the extent that it does in you. Our friend felt as though the gates of hell had closed on him with a clank. This next sentence is a warning also. He said to the doctor, is there no exception? Utter hopelessness. Complete ego deflation. I want to just backtrack a second because as I read this recently, something new came to me that I'll share with you. That part where he says, I have never seen one single case recover where that state of mind existed. For years I read that and thought he meant sort of like wet brain. And I think what Dr. Jung means really is the opposite. It's not that he's so deteriorated. It's the fact that he's still relying on, quote unquote, sharp mental skills, logic, rationality, problem solving. I think that's what he means, because I'm thinking of the people that I've known over the years who have been chronic relapsers who eventually died or faded away from Alcoholics Anonymous. And what they had was such a strong commitment to their own mental process, their own problem-solving skills, that they weren't able to have an opening for a genuine spiritual experience. So anyway, Roland asks, is there no exception? Dr. Jung says, and this is promise reward, this is in blue. Yes, replied the doctor, there is. Exceptions to cases as yours have been occurring since early times. Here and there, once in a while, Alcoholics Anonymous have had what are called vital spiritual experiences. All of that I have in blue. Not that I presume that it's my role, but to edit or revise the big book. But if General Service called me, and like they always do, they're always just dialing me up, and and said, David, we want to rename the big book. What would you want to call it? I would be tempted to want to call it How to Have a Vital Spiritual Experience. And because that's the key, that's what this whole book is about. Remember the main object, where this is called the main object meeting. The main object. Here we go. Vital spiritual experience. The rest of this paragraph, by the way, is in green for explanation or description. To me, this is Dr. Jung speaking now. To me, these occurrences are phenomena. If you look in the chat, I define phenomena. Phenomena, what I found is, well, first of all, in this statement, Dr. Jung has a very specific definition of phenomena in mind. And there are many definitions of the word phenomena. But this one, I think, is the critical one that he meant. Events or people that are observed that are unusual or unexplainable. And I think that unexplainable part is key. So think about that. And why I think what I'm starting to sense is that the fact that it be unexplainable is almost critical, because if I can explain it, I will apply logic to it, and I will understand it, and I will try to mentally own and dominate it. So, to me, these occurrences are phenomena. They appear to be in the nature of huge emotional displacements and rearrangements. Ideas, emotions, and attitudes which were once the guiding forces of the lives of these men are suddenly cast to one side, and a completely new sense of conceptions and motives begin to dominate them. In fact, I have been trying to produce some such emotional rearrangement within you, which links back to a few paragraphs ago where he's hitting Roland with these harsh medical realities. So Dr. Jung believed that ego deflation was critical. With many individuals, the methods which I employed are successful, but I have never been successful with an alcoholic of your description. And this is the power, ladies and gentlemen, of Alcoholics Anonymous, because and the absolute genius of Bill Wilson. Because what Bill Wilson did was create a movement and a method for reproducing a vital spiritual experience at will. Meaning that if you want a vital spiritual experience and are willing to do what is prescribed, you will get a vital spiritual experience. Up to this point, they were rare occurrences. The next paragraph I have in all in pink for a warning. Upon hearing this, our friend was somewhat relieved, for he reflected that, after all, he was a good church member. It's a warning, because, as it says, this hope, however, was destroyed by the doctors telling him that while his religious convictions were very good, in his case they did not spell the necessary vital spiritual experience. And we could have a lengthy debate or discussion, rather, as to the differences between church or religion and the vital spiritual experience that he's talking about. However, just for the record, I will say I am not one who believes some of the things that we hear in meetings about the differences between spirituality and religion and the spiritual life of Alcoholics Anonymous versus the religious life of church. I don't think that one is necessarily better than the other. I don't think that one is superior to another. I think one is more effective for addressing alcoholism, and another may be more effective for creating a depth of lived experience. But I think both groups and both institutions are sacred. So, but just for different reasons. Moving on. I want to get to the end here. I'm 3 minutes over. We're at the top of 28. This is all warning. This next paragraph, that is, here was the terrible dilemma in which our friend found himself when he had the extraordinary experience, which, as we have already told you, made him a free man. And what Roland did, just by the way, and you read this in his biography link that I posted there. Ironically, Roland was never an AA member. But what he did was he got involved with the Oxford groups. And through the Oxford groups, he, quote unquote, saved a boyhood friend who was about to go into jail. He was up before a judge, and Roland interceded and brought that boyhood friend, Ebby Thatcher, into the Oxford group. Ebby got sober, and if we were here about a month and a half ago, what did Ebby do in turn? Ebby delivered the message to Bill. So see the connection? This last paragraph here is all in blue for a promise. We in turn sought the same escape with the desperation of drowning men. Think about that image. The desperation of drowning men. And often, especially when I was new, I thought of myself, okay, yeah, I'm a drowning man, but oh, the life preserver they threw me was orange. I want a yellow one. Can I? Oh, it's got the fabric is just not. Ooh, you know. You mean I gotta put it on? I did not have the desperation of a drowning man. I thought I did, but I did not. What seemed at first a flimsy reed has proved to be the loving and powerful hand of God. A new life has been given us, or if you prefer, a design for living that really works. And I'll just say this, I hope I don't brush too far into the 10th tradition here, but I think it's quite fitting that today of all days, Easter Sunday, we finish out our text with the sentence, a new life has been given us, or if you prefer, a design for living that really works. And we'll go further into that next week. And with that, thank you for indulging me an extra 6 minutes. So I'd like to open it up for any thoughts, comments, disagreements. Donna, please go ahead.
Good morning, everyone. Happy Easter to all who celebrate. Thank you, David. Can you just repeat the 4 resolves again?
Certainly. Well, the four commitments are high resolve, knowledge of, I used to call it self knowledge, but then I realized that gets into dicey territory. But I realized what you need is knowledge of the medical facts of the disease, i.e., the dual nature, obsession versus the allergy, not versus, obsession and allergy, ego deflation, which is actually the third. I put it last when I gave it earlier, and a spiritual plan for living. When you look at Dr. Bob's story and Bill W.'s story, they're the story of two individuals acquiring those four elements. And when you have those four elements, it's like the four numbers in a combination lock. And when they had three of the four, the door wouldn't open. But as soon as they had the four, they were able to stay sober and work the steps. They were almost like precursors to the steps, if that makes sense. Or I should say, like, the ability to work the steps in a way that would support the vital spiritual experience.